Let's begin by all joining together and praying. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be pleasing in your sight, for you are our rock. You are our Redeemer. Amen. I really do believe that if you want to pick out one part of Christianity that has been just abused and misunderstood and misapplied more than anything else in the Bible, this offering thing, this is it. Whenever we think about offerings and giving to God, there's just a lot that can go wrong. I think back to 15-year-old Steve on a mission trip with my high school to one of our churches on the Caribbean island of Antigua. One afternoon, us high schoolers went with their youth group, kind of walking through the neighborhoods, inviting people to an event. I don't remember what the event was. And the basic thing that we went and said was, hey, I'm from St. John's. We've got this going on. We would love to see you. We'd love to have you come. And like here, most of the people there just kind of brushed us off. A few people got really excited and said, hey, that's awesome. We'll be there. Our kids will be there. But for one man, this was too far. His response to the kind of, hey, come and be here with us was simply, no. All the church wants is my money. That's why they want me there in that building. That's what churches are all about. Taking money from everybody else and then using it for their own good. You want my money. I'm not giving it. I'm not going to be there. Now, stunned 15-year-old me was kind of trying to prep in my mind, how can I have a theological conversation and not really thinking about this very angry man as he was walking towards me, that one of our very kind friends from Antigua walked up and grabbed me and pulled me away and said, no, we're going to keep moving on. There's more to do. But I think about situations like that. I think about my friend Grady and how his life was just in a bad place. He showed up at the giant front doors of our church late one Friday night when I was still sitting inside, and he tried to give us something for not calling the police and having his car towed away from our parking lot. It took a while of back and forth, but Grady won me over, and finally I let him pass me the $20, and he said, put this in the offering plate on Sunday. But then he shared why he felt compelled to give that 20. Because the church that Grady grew up in when he was little was serious about offerings and giving money to God. So serious that when his family ran out of money and could not give any more money to them, that he and his family got kicked out of that church. So in Grady's mind, he thought that this 20 that he was handing me, that this was what God wanted from him, and that giving this 20 then, that made him feel a little bit better. I think about the first time that I opened up, it's kind of strange, but a letter in the mail that has a prayer carpet inside of it. Anybody else ever get these? It's kind of a very southern thing, but I remember opening this letter up, and it's literally just a piece of paper that is like a printed decoration on it that kind of looks like a carpet, but it came with special instructions. Take this piece of paper, kneel down and pray on the carpet, and then afterwards you send that back to us with $1. Then God will hear that prayer, and we'll send the prayer rug back to you, and then you pray on it again, and then next time you send $5, and then 10, and then 20, and then 100, and then 1,000. And as you send this back and forth between this group, then God will hear your prayers more. Then God will answer your prayers and give you what you want to give. I think you and I could go on probably with 100 different stories about how outsiders outside of Christianity got turned off because of this money thing. Or how people inside the church, people that you love and want to be part of your church, they leave because they don't like a decision that's being made about spending money. I think this is why it's so worthwhile for us to simply go back to the principles behind money, behind every offering given to God, and to clarify, what exactly is God after? Why do we still give to God? And what does offerings and giving offerings to God have anything to do with our big theme of slowing down. We are not going to cover all the incredible details about the two special festivals that we did listen to. So later on, shoot me a text, an email, call me, let me know what questions you have about that. There's some real specific, awesome meaning in some of the specific ways that God set those things up. But for today, we're just going to work on the big picture for offerings and giving to God in general. We need to first start with the principles that are behind everything we give. Here's the first one. God told these people, "When you enter the land I am going to give you, and you reap its harvest." And we need to think first about who God is talking to. Remember that all of these laws are being given in the middle of the desert. All of these laws are given to people who are living in tents off manna and quail for food. These are people that did not have farms or fields or seasons to harvest. But God promised these people one day they would. He promised that he would give them a new home. He promised that he would put them in a place where crops would grow and would thrive and where they would have so much. God promised that he would bless them with fields full of food that they would have to every year do the farmer thing, chop it down, and put it into their barns. Big principle number one behind giving anything back to God has to be knowing that the Lord is the one who provides. Giving to God does not start with what you and I have. It starts first with a God who graciously gives and provides us with what we need. Principle number two behind giving. Offerings and giving to God are supposed to be from the best and the first of what you have. Literally, for these people, you heard about how it was the first of their spring harvest. That means instead of doing what would be logical and make sense, instead of cutting it down and getting into the barn and having some that you know that would be there forever, it means taking that very first stuff and actually trusting that God would provide more later. Instead of eating it and being thankful that you had food to eat from the harvest that year, you would bake it into very special cakes and give the finest of your flowers and the finest of your food, and you give that back to God. And then you hear in between these two festivals, you take 50 days after that spring harvest starts, and you do it again. For almost 2 months, your focus while you're harvesting is this is the first, this is the best, and how you're going to give some of it back to God. Principle number 3 behind giving. Offerings to the Lord are a really cool sign that the Lord is your God. Sounds kind of obvious, I know, but let's think about it. These are the people that grumble and complain right after God rescues them with miracles out of Egypt. These are the people that literally say, not too long after that they want to go back into the life of slavery because at least there they had food that they could eat. These are the people that literally, as God is giving these laws, that they build a golden calf and they bow down and they worship this thing while God is up there on the mountain because Moses is gone too long. These people are sinners who sin pretty well, pretty boldly. And throughout all of these guidelines, what is God doing? God is reminding them, God is reminding everybody else around them too, that he wants to be their God. That he wants to set them apart as his, that he wants everybody to know that he is with these sinful people, that he's here for them. 3 big things behind giving. Number 1, the Lord provides what you need. Number 2, the Lord has to come first. Number 3, the Lord is your God who wants you, who wants to be with you, who wants to be your God. So that's some of the what in offerings and thinking about offerings. Let's get into the how. And for the how, I think it's best that we do what we did when we read through these. Let's go 1,500 years into the future, forward from Leviticus, and we find Jesus at the temple with his disciples. As they stood or sat there and They watched what was described as crowds of people coming to the temple to give money to God. They see what you'd expect to see. People who have money give money. Many of them are probably well-dressed, and outwardly, life looks pretty good. They're described, a bunch of them, they are wealthy and they give out of their wealth. But as they're sitting or standing there, then they see a woman that looks like she has nothing. Her clothes are torn. Her body looks malnourished and not much food. This woman's got nothing. But they sit there and they watch as she takes out 2 small, tiny copper coins and she drops them in her offering for God. Now, Jesus sees this and he does not miss out on teaching opportunities. So Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, put in everything, all she had to live on." How could she do that? Wouldn't she be worrying about food for the rest of that day? Wouldn't she want to build up kind of a pile of money so that maybe she could get out of this awful life that she was living? And she gave more than everybody else. How is that possible? If you don't know how, if you feel like you've been a little bit off when it comes to this giving thing to God, when you're thinking about offerings, if you're mad because there's a pastor in a church who's talking about offerings to God at all, you and I need the how. But the truth is, you're not going to see it with your eyes, but it's going to be behind her actions. Because behind this offering that she gave, everything she had was a heart that was so full of God's promises to her. A heart so full of forgiveness from that God that loved her that she could give everything. It was an awful financial decision. This meant she would have to beg and maybe go home hungry. And it meant that her heart was God's. God was her everything. Worshiping God and trusting him was how she wanted to live life. What seemed like this crazy blind faith from any outsider that was watching was something deep inside of her that she knew was true that day and every day after that. That she would have everything she needed in a gracious God who keeps promises. She had peace from forgiveness that would be given from the answer to all the promises that was standing not too far from her in the temple that day. She trusted God. She knew that God would provide more than enough. And that day she revealed what a heart looks like when God is everything for a person. Let's be honest, this is something we struggle with. Maybe this is something you feel like your offerings, and I'm not just talking money, but time and energy and relationship work and obeying God in all the ways he calls us to do, that maybe it's been far from your everything you've been giving? Are you somebody that's wanting so badly that maybe God would finally change you so that you could act on your faith in big ways and do awesome things like this widow did? Then we also got to go to a different place. And that's actually our kitchen table from 2 days ago, or yesterday in the morning, actually, we did this. Then we get to think about the most used, most popular science fair project in the world, at least in America, the volcano. Our kids got to experience this not too long ago for the first time, and I think it was really cool to see it through their eyes. So Joanna took the mold and baked the plaster, and we let it dry. Then Nora and Margot together, they took the paint and they painted it all over, and we waited for the paint to dry, and until finally yesterday in the morning it was ready. And then Joanna added the chemicals, and you poured it in slowly, and what happened? Lava. It wasn't that dramatic. We wish it would have been that dramatic, but lava bubbles up and comes over, and lava pours over the side, and red lava kind of goes down and goes over into the pan, and it was so cool, you guys. We did it twice. We had one, lava comes up, and a second eruption, and lava comes up, and it pours over. What happens? A volcano gets filled, and it gets bubbling inside, and it gets too full, and lava erupts. and it just comes out. That, you guys, is a real decent picture of what God does for us in Jesus. Remember how we started this entire series going back to the importance of all this, of Jesus? Knowing that you are forgiven freely and fully. That's the beginning of everything. Knowing that God loves you and is never going to leave you, that's where we have to start with all of this. God has to first fill up our hearts, so full of good news of forgiveness in Jesus, and that has to be first. And then do you know how Jesus describes what happens to us? It's kind of like a spring of water that wells up inside and bubbles up and just pours out. When we're so full of Jesus and this goodness in Jesus, we overflow. So slow down today and get your heart right first. You can't do offerings right to God if you're not right in here. You can't overflow for God when there's only just a tiny little bit left at the bottom of your heart. Slow down. Go back to his promises. Go back to all the ways that he has proved that he is the God that keeps promises for you. Go back to Jesus and God's simple but unbelievable grace for you today. First, slow down. Fill up your heart with that. And then you can do what God kind of set up with these Old Testament offerings, to slow down with the rest of your life. Don't just speed through. Don't put your faith on autopilot and your actions just doing without thinking. To give God your all from your heart is a comprehensive thing. This is going to take some work, some time to figure out how to do it best. It's going to take planning and coordination. It's going to take encouragement from other people around you today. When you overflow with Jesus and you want to thank God, you got to slow down so that you can do it in a way that actually shows that God is your all. So here's 3 kind of specific encouragements for how you can slow down once you're full of Jesus and give God your best. Number 1, we've said it for 4 weeks, but start making your life a little bit less busy. Try it. Cut out a night of sports for you or your family. Don't take every shift or promotion your job offers. Slow down and actually take time to rest and reset so that every week you can have what you need to get through. One of the first things to go when you make yourself too much and too full is a heart at peace in Jesus. So practically just start to change that by making more time. Get rid of some of the pressure. Be less busy. And for some of you, I think this might be the biggest and best way you can show that God is your all. Because sacrificing busyness, sacrificing lots of stuff going on, that's going to feel like a pretty huge sacrifice. But that's number 1. Number 2, do not wait for me or other church leaders or other people connected to you in your life and to find the perfect position, the perfect volunteer opportunity that matches with what you like and what you're able to do. No, to live your life as a Christian, to just do what we want to do as a church, just means you get to it. You just get to work and you help Ascension start to be what it can be. It's kind of dumb but simple. Download our Church Center app and help us find the gaps as we're starting to work more with this thing. Start to tell us when communication is not working so that we can fix it and can communicate better. Lead a Sunday school class for a week. Tell me you are willing to try hosting a life group. You're willing to facilitate a life group. I mean, you and I have unlimited opportunities to reflect this goodness of Jesus that overflows in our heart. So don't wait for me. Don't wait for permission. Get to it. Do it today. And then number 3, something that is important, is part of what God calls us to do if we want to give our all. Take the time to check out where you are financially and think through better what you can give. God gives other really good guidelines for churches and money stuff. Guidelines like you have to give in proportion to what you have. Amounts really can be meaningless. God gives you what you have. You're going to never outgive God, but you got to give in proportion. You should not be giving to church and leave nothing for food or clothes or rent or necessities. God also isn't happy when you show that you don't care about your other responsibilities in life. And also, you got to give your first and your best to God. That means you're setting a new online recurring gift when your salary goes up or you get the promotion before spending the rest that you still can spend. But even with money, you say something. You show people that when you are overflowing with Jesus, you give God your all. And when you do this, it's going to be clear in a most beautiful way that God truly is your all. One of the most interesting details that pops up, I think, 3 times in this little section from Leviticus about offerings is that God does this. God smells and is pleased. So don't get me wrong, God is not a person. God is not like you and me who stands by the grill and we want to breathe in. When you put the steak on, it's just cooking just right and the smoke comes out perfectly. No, this is just a comparison trying to help us understand. But the picture here is one that I think we need to remember about offerings, is that they make God's heart glad. God gets excited when he has our heart and we overflow for him. We can actually please God. If you slow down your life to do these things, to fill up with the gospel, if you slow down your life to think through and plan out your giving to God, you can know that this makes God happy. He does not need you to take that extra shift. He does not need you to score that goal or study more to get that A on the next test. He needs your heart, full and overflowing for him. Slow down, and I promise you, this is going to make God happy. But then also, this will bring many blessings to the people around you. This is going to stop you from getting burned out. It'll mean that we can be the church that we want to be as we're generous with time and money and efforts with each other. Slowing life down is a beautiful offering to the Lord your God, who promises to still give you everything you need. Start to slow down, start to fill up more and more with that, and I promise you, God's going to make all this worth it. Amen.